Now on the same day, two of them were going to the village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem.
and talking with each other about all those things that had happened.
While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them.
But their eyes were kept from recognizing him.
And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad.
As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on.
But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them.
When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them.
Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him.
I'm grateful to be able to continue to journey with you and share and worship this evening. Appreciative so much of the opportunity to receive ministry from those who have already offered ministry in music and in prayer and sharing of stories and the reading of scripture. It's a wonderful gift to be able to participate tonight in worship. Some of you are probably aware that one of the things that has become part of my discipline and journey of ministry has been the working with music as a spiritual practice. And each day I have a playlist of songs that I go through to help center me and focus me as I begin to encounter the opportunities of the day. And I change the song that I sing and that I give most attention to. And this song is one that's been around within our tradition a long time. It's at one point in time, it was labeled as the song that was to be the theme song of the ministry of 70. And I, for whatever reason, this last couple of weeks, this has been the song that I've been giving focus to. So as part of my message, I want to continue in the spirit of worship and song that we've just even heard. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. If you can't preach like Peter, if you can't pray like Paul, just tell the love of Jesus and say he died for all. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Several years ago, I watched online former stand-up comedian turned Lutheran pastor, Nadia Bolz-Weber, speak at a Christian literary festival. She was very entertaining, she was insightful, she was provocative, and in the question and answer portion of her particular sharing, an audience member asked her what practices she engaged in to bring her closer to God. Bolz-Weber kind of scrunched up her face a little bit and she said, "Why would I want to do that? Every time I find myself close to Jesus, I'm asked to love someone I hate or forgive someone I don't want to." Her response by the audience was met with some scattered laughter, some of that nervous laughter that suggests a little bit of recognition and discomfort. Now, as over the top as some people might feel that Nadia Bolz-Weber's answer was, she clearly hit home with many of us, myself included. Why do I want to move closer to someone asking me to embrace people and practices that might change me, that might disrupt me? We are in a continuing space of disorientation and disruption. And it is also a space when people continue to wrestle with what's next and not sure what to do next. This disruption did not begin with the pandemic. The variety of emotions that people are experiencing didn't begin with the death of George Floyd. We have been in this space a long time, but now we've had protracted amounts of time to pay attention. Individual grieving, community grieving, restricted celebrating and grieving. It's been a time of recognizing the depth of the emotions and recognizing that the Spirit of God is resident in all of it. Now, from the scripture passage that was shared with us tonight, the stranger entered their conversation without taking over. Jesus falls into step with the two companions on the road, and he invites them to tell a little bit of their story. What are you discussing with each other as you walk along? They were probably caught off guard by the question of the stranger. Cleopas is named and his co-traveler, unnamed. Some suspect it is his wife. They tell Jesus everything. They share with him their story of faith, its rise and its fall. They tell Jesus how high their expectations had been for their now crucified leader, a prophet who was mighty in word and deed before God and all the people. And they try to describe their devastation at his death and the confusion and the loss and the uncertainty. And this phrase that continues to visit me probably on a daily basis, but we had hoped. Each of us at times in life have walked, or maybe you are currently walking on a road to Emmaus and are part of the conversation that goes, but we had hoped. We had hoped the tumor wasn't malignant. We had hoped our marriage would get easier. We had hoped our son would come home. We had hoped the depression would lift. We had hoped to keep our jobs. We had hoped to carry our baby to full term. We had hoped the pandemic would spare our family. We had hoped for a peaceful death. We had hoped to experience God's presence when we pray. We had hoped our faith would survive. The words we speak on the road to Emmaus might be words of pain and disappointment, bewilderment, and yearning. They're the words we say when we've come to the end of our hopes, when our expectations have been dashed, our cherished dreams are dead, and there's nothing left to do but leave, sometimes defeated and done. But we had hoped. These two travelers are sure the Messiah is dead. The one they staked their lives on, the Messiah that they thought would change the world, has died, and his promises of a new kingdom have come to nothing. On top of his death, Jesus' tomb is empty. His body is missing. And the part that wasn't shared tonight, but it is part of the story, and the women come along and tell of these absurd stories of reports of angels and gardeners and talking ghosts. Everything has come off the rails for these two people and those not even in this scene. But we had hoped is now gone. The stranger listens. He provides them the space to get it all out. And then, when they're done, he begins to tell them a story from a different perspective. In his retelling, it becomes what it really always was. Something bigger, something deeper than the travelers on the Emmaus Road even began to understand. Here's what you're leaving out, Jesus said, and some of you are old enough to remember this, or here's the rest of the story, as usually quoted by a man named Paul Harvey. Some of you are too young to know that. The rest of the story, Jesus says, here's what you are missing. When Jesus begins to tell the story, he restores both its context, the framework of which they are telling the story, and adds the meaning to it. He grounds the story in memory, in tradition, in history, in scripture. He helps them find their place in a story that began long, long before them, and a story big enough to hold their disappointment. And as the words in their mind and in their throat continue to be said, but we had hoped, Jesus reminds them of a story that continues to unfold that still holds all of their hope. They're so captured by the story when they come to this division in the road, they don't want their time together to come to an end. And so they invite the stranger to stay. But I believe it is in the invitation that they offer to the stranger to come and stay with them, we discover something else that I hope we cling to tonight and beyond. Emmaus invites us to expect God to find us. Emmaus expects us to be able to have that understanding that no matter where we walk on the road, we can have the expectation that God will find us even when we don't recognize God with us. And that is the power of the walk of Emmaus, that God shows up when nobody expects God to be present. We had hoped. Emmaus challenges us to see that it isn't our unshakable faith and deep spirituality that connects us with the risen Christ, but the smallest gesture of hospitality and friendship. Will you come stay with us? For Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus' resurrection story that's contained in those three accounts is more about what the disciples are to do than what Jesus is doing. In each of those accounts, the disciples are left to continue the story or not continue the story. The gospel writers leave the story open-ended with something left to do, something more to happen. And that makes me wonder, as I wrestle so often with that possibility with which God is trying to share with me and point out to me and push me along. What if the resurrection event isn't the end of the story, but in reality, it is the beginning of the story? What if the resurrection event isn't the answer, but it's a question for each of us? What if the resurrection event is a call waiting for our response? What if part of the invitation to move toward Jesus, the peaceful one, that one that is proclaiming the resurrection is not for some future time and place, but is here and now, and we are the ones to tell the rest of the story? What if the resurrection is the beginning of our faithful discipleship and not the end of God's dream? Well, I'm going to say an awful lot. Oh, I had hoped that I wouldn't be asked to do that, God. I would like a pass, please. But what if the story continues by our faithful witness? And in order to be faithful in witnessing, we have to do more than give lip service to Jesus. We have to be in a relationship with Jesus. And we can't base our relationship on grandma's testimony or grandpa's activities. We must have a personal relationship with Jesus ourselves and encounter the risen Christ. And then we must share that story with others. It does no good for us to keep it to ourselves in order that we can feel good about our family story. Our family story is the beginning of the resurrection, and we are asked, go and tell. In case you can't notice, I believe this very deeply within me. I want the church, known as Community of Christ, to take up very seriously the call that God has given us to be faithful witnesses, to include and embrace and embody every aspect of God's creation and life abundantly with joy. As the rest proclaim we had hoped, may we have the courage to share this is not the end of the story, but the beginning of what God is doing with us now. And this is not to be an academic or an intellectual enterprise. That the disciples are witnesses does not mean they now have all the answers. It means they now have the life that Jesus wants to give them. They are witnesses based not on what they know, but on who they know, how they live, and their relationship with the risen one. When I lived in England, and I was all alone, and in my flat, I would have to get out sometimes and just go for a walk. And I found a little cafe on Edie Street. And I walked in there one day to order what I would call a breakfast sandwich. They called it a BAP, I believe. And the breakfast sandwich I loved because British bacon, for those of you, the other part of my life now is chicken wings, but I love all forms of good dead pig. Hope nobody's offended by that. But British bacon is amazing. It's thick. It's just, it brings tears to the face of Jesus as I'm eating this particular bacon. Oh, that's a little much. Okay. It's delicious. I walked in there in this store I'd never been in before, and the woman says to me, "Oh, hello, Pastor Larry. Good to see you." What? I've never been in there before. She had met me someplace at church, and I had not even recognized her. It was a wonderful opportunity to be able to connect. As I was sitting there waiting for my order, there was a gentleman who was at a table by himself, and he was reading the newspaper and eating a sandwich and having tea. And I just kind of casually engaged him in a conversation a little bit, and he moved his newspaper over and he put his hand down on the seat and invited me to come sit with him. And I got to begin to share with him a little bit. His name was Mark, and he was a retired teacher of karate, and his wife had died the year before. And he would come to the cafe on Edie Street just to have something to do and to see people. And so we engaged, and I was going to take my sandwich home and begin to work. And I thought, I'll stay and eat. So I stayed and had my sandwich with him and a cup of coffee, and we talked. I find myself walking over to that cafe once a week to have a sandwich, and usually Mark was sitting there in the cafe. And whenever I came in, he would greet me and invite me to sit down next to him and be able to talk. Finally, one time he asked me, "What do you do for a living, and why are you here as a foreigner?" And I shared with him that I was a minister with Community of Christ, and our congregation was just a little around the corner from the cafe. And the lady who was waiting on us, her name was Valerie, and she said, "Yes, he's one of the ministers from the church that my son and daughter-in-law go to," and so on and so forth. And so we talked a little bit about Community of Christ and my role and responsibility there for the British Isles Mission Center and the European field. He asked about my travels and where I went, and then one day he shared with me that he was going to be traveling to Spain for the colder months of the winter there in England and go to the south of Spain where it was going to be a little bit warmer. He was going to take his caravan, what we would call a travel trailer, and go across the channel with a ferry and go on over there. And he was going to be gone for several months. And he looked at me and he said, "Will you be here when I get back?" I think that's the question that haunts me sometimes when I know that there are people yearning for a deep, authentic relationship with God, and I'm there just for a little bit, and I hear Mark's words, "Will you be here when I get back?" In the midst of all the disruption and disorientation, regardless of everything the disciples who were on that road had seen and heard, what they had witnessed, the question that they had wrestled with was, "But we had hoped. Will you be here when I get back?" Let's not lose this moment. Let's not just put this biblical text behind us. Carry this text with you, with me, us, over the next several weeks. Be open to allow it to open our eyes and our heart and our mind to the possibility to which God is inviting us. Sit with it, pray with it, wrestle with it, trust it. Don't shy away from being disrupted by the text. Lean into it. You are witnesses of these things, he says to the disciples. Tell it, live it, become it. You are witnesses to the story that brings life. Lean in closer to the one who says to you, "Go bear witness." Amen.